Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into our AI-based algorithm that has technical analysis and a predictive analytics looking a week out into the future. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at what's currently happening. This article from Yahoo Finance goes on to say that this week marked 1 year since the rollout of adult use cannabis programs in Canada, by adding edibles and beverages and vapes to the list of approved products. Legally accredited cannabis producers in the country sold about 1.1 billion of legal cannabis during the first year of legalization, according to an analysis of retail sales data by Cannabis Benchmarks. Meanwhile, Mexico continued to move closer to full legalization as key Senate leaders unveiled draft legislation. Looking at individual equities, it looks like Afria went on a rally after reporting net first quarter revenues of 126 million, up 849% year over year. Meanwhile, shares of Diane Med Brands went on a volatility roller coaster as the CEO and COO resigned and the company defaulted on its debt obligations. Quote, the implosion of Diane Med is a story that we see many get repeated more often in the future months. The company has imploded quickly after basically not making debt payments. Usually the creditors try to work out a deal so that they get at least something. In this case, it looked like more creditors were being lined up with their palms out. In this case, one company demanded 24 million, which is probably going to bankrupt the company. The CEO and CEO have resigned, a spectacular flame out that we sadly may see more of in the future, end quote. Some cannabis exchange traded funds delivered some big gains over the last few trading days. Horizon's Marijuana Life Index rose 3.6%. ETFMG Alternative Harvest Index gained 5.15%. And Advisor Shares Pure Cannabis ETF was up 4.38%. In other cannabis financing news, FlowHub, a cannabis retail management platform, closed an oversubscribed $23 million Series A financing round led by Kraft Heinz, which is interesting that Warren Buffett is in the cannabis business. Other individual equity gainers and losers, MedMen gained 8.4%. Zenerba Pharmaceuticals was up another 3.2%. We reported that on the podcast last week as a potential buy opportunity. Looks like they are continuing to increase. On the downside, looks like Planet 13 Holdings shares dropped over 5.4%. Hexco shares fell over 6%. Following its $70 million debt offering and postponement of its fourth quarter earnings report. And Therapix Biosciences dropped by 5.3%. So there's been a lot of pullback in the cannabis financing sector as of lately. On top of that, BNY Mellon's cannabis limiting move highlights inconsistencies in the banking. Bank of New York Mellon's Pershing department is going to stop clearing trades for publicly traded cannabis companies. Quote, BNY Mellon's owned Pershing is responsible for the clearance of a third of all trades in the U.S. Clearing banks essentially finalize financial transactions. BNY Mellon, which controls roughly 35 trillion of assets, issued a notice to clients in early October saying it will no longer accept incoming positions of non-permitted cannabis securities effective November 30th. So while the bank did not spell out what it meant exactly by non-permitted securities, the move targets, among others, U.S. cannabis multi-state operators trading on Canadian Stock Exchange. So the goal of this is to ensure that they maintain the highest standards of anti-money laundering and know your customer regulatory compliance in the burgeoning investment space while continuing to serve clients' increasingly complex investment needs. So essentially, any company that's trading on the Canadian Stock Exchange could be affected because Pershing clears all of those trades. So you need somebody that's going to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay more in fees to find somebody else to do the same thing. So either that or they're going to be delisted. So it's going to be a headache, if nothing else, in the meantime. But have no fear, Snoop Dogg is here. Bespoke Financial, a lender for cannabis companies, is backed by Snoop Dogg's Casa Verde Capital, so leave it to Snoop Dogg to come in and save the day. Bespoke Financial wants to provide cannabis businesses with the same kind of financial services that other businesses get, but that dispensaries and growers can't yet access. So this TechCrunch article goes on to say, quote, the regulations around cannabis operations are so stringent at the local level and so nebulous at the federal level that national banks won't give businesses in the cannabis industry the same basic services like short-term loans. That's why one former Goldman Sachs banker has partnered with two entrepreneurs from the traditional agricultural industry to create Bespoke Financial. And that's why the company has raised $7 million in financial, led by Casa Verde Capital, the investment firm launched by legendary cannabis aficionado Snoop Dogg. The $7 million infusion from investors, including Casa Verde Capital, Greenhouse Capital Partners, and Outbound Ventures, will be used to build out the company's business and establish the first credit lines with customers. So it already has about $3 million worth in loans revolving through its business. And right now the company is focused on California, but it says it could expand to other regions that are embracing legalization. So apparently there were 770,000 benchmark indexes that were scrapped around the world in 2019, according to Bloomberg. But even more ridiculous is that there are 2.96 million indexes globally. So this Yahoo Finance article asks, should you buy the dip in marijuana indexes ahead of earnings? Spoiler alert, you're going to find out in the next podcast episode with Rohit that our index is showing you that next week is crucial to whether or not the floor has been met. There's been a support at $4.75 for our index, but that could drop to $3.90 before that floor has been fully met, and we expect it to go up from there. So maybe now is the time. It might dip a little bit, but I think we're near the bottom. Timing is everything, which is why this AI-based algorithm is even more interesting. Back on the podcast, Rohit Srivastava, he's the Chief Investment Officer and Portfolio Manager with Saroj and Bhanu Fund. We're going to talk again about the AI-based algorithm. There's technical analysis with this cannabis index that has predictive analytics. So for entertainment purposes only, why don't you tell us what's going to happen next week?
Thanks, Josh. So this week we have stuff going on. First, the disclaimer that this is all for fun and entertainment and learning. There is no advice we're giving to anybody here. And this is the index, which we talked about multiple times in previous times, that these are all the stocks which we'll be investing in the index. This was like 2 months ago. This was last week. And here we are this week, which could be a reversal, which is saying that, it bounced back on 475. Last week, we were waiting to see that if it will bounce back, and it looks like it is bouncing back. It is not yet a buying point, I would say. I think I would let it ride for some time to have a confirmation before we get in. At this point, the index is at $4.96, and anytime $5.05, I would say that that's a good point of reversal, and that's the point to buy at this point. But we will see in one more week and see if it sticks to that reversal and it's not a forced reversal. So that's the first angle of it. The second angle is the cash in and outflow. Right? Like this was 2 months ago, this was last week, and this is this week, where you can see that there is a new pattern that has been following, and it is at a point where it might break this pattern, and it is at a point where it could, if it breaks this pattern, then probably it is a good point to get in. That means that a lot of cash in is already flowing, and if it's not, then probably it's a false indicator that it is basically going to turn around. So I would say that I think would wait for the zero level to cross. If it crosses the zero level, then what it will confirm is that it is changing the pattern. It is changing the way it is investing. People are investing into that. Funds are investing into that. It might be a good point to get into that.
Because it looks like it could be trending down to that July 31st point where it could crash down and hit that 375 support level on the previous slide. All of that is lining up to look very similar to previous patterns where there has been an increase and then a serious dip.
That is correct. That is correct. You're absolutely correct. That it could be a false indicator and it could fall down further. And this rally, which you might be seeing in the last 2 weeks, might just be a bluff. Well, on the short-term investments, this was like about a month ago. This was last week, and this week we have 3 more additions. Is the CGC, CRON, and TRPA. TLRY. Those are the 3 additions which we had about a couple of days ago. But other than that, the other stocks are really doing very well. Like, for example, some of the ones which we added, which is the GWPH, GWPH, which we added last week, is about 13% up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. But some of the big players, the ABBV, GWPH, and MO, those big players are actually doing very good, which is actually a very good sign in terms of why some of the indexes might be doing good in this section.
We have almost 40% more that have been alerted than last week. And last week we had 50% more than the week before. So it's definitely indicating that more and more potential buys are being alerted.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And some of these are have been in a positive sign for a couple of weeks, like the ABVV and the MO. Those two have been like for past couple of weeks, they have been like in a very positive direction. So well, and like I said, like you're saying that, when most of them are being like indicator in the last 2-3 weeks, they have doubled every week. So it is a positive, it is a very good sign, but we do have to confirm the sign that it's really actually going in the positive direction. And like last week, we talked about how GWPH was such a good buy in terms of that the retracement point where it is like at a 2-year reversal. And this week, just confirming and more bragging about like how awesome our prediction was, that it is actually about 13+% gain from the time last week we actually had indicated that it is. And I had some nervousness like around 131 where that's where I was thinking that it might bounce back at that, it might reverse at that point, but it did not. And for long-term investors, that's pretty awesome. And I usually, as a short-term investor, I usually try to take some gains and let it ride some of the aspect of it, so that we're not like always 0 and 1 every time. So that's a very good prediction or tool made. So for summarizing, what really that is that it is holding the 475 support, and it is at a point that it could bounce off. I would say that I would wait 1 more week and see that if that support holds and bounces back further to confirm that that is a good point to buy. And for short-term investors, there are like 3 more good stocks that has been turned around. Cron, and actually there's another one which I'll probably focus next week, is the Hexo. And it is one of these stocks which had been in my radar for some time, but it is not at a point where it has triggered to buy. But probably next week or next time, if it's in a point where it has to buy, then probably we'll focus on see if it's a good point to buy or not. Well, that's all I have at this point on what's happening on the AI side of the cannabis indexes.
Well, I'm interested to see what happens with Tilray, and then Hexco just delayed their earnings report, and they've had some stuff in the news. So we'll see how baked in the cake that is. Always interested to see what the crystal ball has to say for next week. But that's a pretty good return, 13%. A lot of pension funds would claw to get that annually. You look at the S&P on average, and they're about 15%. So, our AI-based index just got that in 1 week. So not too shabby.
That's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Rohit Srivastava, he's the Chief Investment Officer and Portfolio Manager with Saroj and Bhanu Fund. Appreciate you being back on the podcast. We will see you next week.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.